السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. محمد أخي توي، كيف حالكم؟
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Oh, just having a few technical difficulties. My PC decided to restart on its own just before we went. That's why I'm a bit late.
No, it's fine because I actually delayed this whole thing so that I could have dinner. So it's my
How's the
fault.
stream? Because it's looking a bit laggy on my end.
Is it?
A little bit.
Really?
If it's fine for you, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Fine for me. But
That's fine then. That's all that matters.
let's have a look. I'm gonna have a nosy while people come in and enter the room. Oh, it's fine, bro. It's fine.
That's fine
Just
then.
relax. How you doing, bro? You well?
Alhamdulillah. I'm all right. Assalamu
How's your
alaikum to
dad?
everybody. He's okay, alhamdulillah. He was in hospital for a little bit, but he's out now.
Did you visit him today?
No, I
Oh, you
went to
can't.
pick him up yesterday. Yeah, I went to pick him up from the hospital and took him home, but that's about it.
How's he doing? Is at home now?
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Just gotta make the most of these short bits of time, you know. Things just come out of nowhere sometimes, you know. Well, walillahi alhamd.
May Allah give him shifa.
Ameen.
Allah is
Ameen, my
capable of
brother.
all things.
Ameen, of course, definitely, most definitely. I just saw
Stranger
your
things have
WhatsApp.
happened.
I just saw your WhatsApp profile picture. That's very cute.
Yeah, it's
Already
a
just saw
shame
it
that
now.
I can't show it publicly, isn't it?
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's a nice little photo. Shall I describe it?
Describe it. Yeah, describe it for the people who.
So some dim lighting, relatively dim lighting. Let me get it up. We've got two figures in the distance across a table with a freshly grounded logo in the background and some lighting. Oh, look, it looks like the freshly grounded studio. And who's is that Faisal? It's Faisal sitting on the left side. But who's sitting? It's a small child sitting on
It's
the
a
other
small
side
baby. Yeah.
with a microphone to his face. Whoa. Who could that be? It's not my son. Could be your son. Is he your son? Must be your
Have
son.
you not met Zakaria?
I don't think I met him, no.
How dare you? Yeah, so my WhatsApp profile picture is a picture of me on the freshly grounded set. And Zakaria is sat opposite me on the freshly grounded set in the guest seat. And I've got a picture of us, and it looks like we're having and he's actually like holding the mic and stuff, isn't he?
Yeah.
It looks like he's
Having a natter.
yeah. Oh, Faraz Kareem goes, it's fine, the mise en scene. Bro, I remember that from A levels. What does that mean?
Maison scène.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
I used to use it all the time in like
I can't
Faraz, what does that
remember.
mean? I would Google. We shouldn't Google it because we're on the cast. But Faraz is gonna hook us up, I reckon, with a little deaf. So we'll wait for that. But in the meantime, before we go into today's topic, I'll give you a little story.
Go for it.
So I was reflecting this week about how children are great icebreakers, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Having a child with you is a great icebreaker. I actually wasn't thinking about this week, but this scenario just came on. Yeah, for us it means everything in the scene.
Oh, there you go.
Maybe we learned it in media. Yeah, but can you give us some context for us? Come on, for us, man. Put in some work. So, but children are great icebreakers. Like I remember when I went to Costa during the lockdown at one point to get a takeaway coffee. I was with Zakaria, and there was some women there, some old women, and you know they were like, and normally with especially in London, right? Like people are not, you know, like amazingly friendly. Like when I used to live in Cardiff, it became the norm that you go into a shop and you just start talking to the person in front of you or behind you in the queue and stuff like that. Like it's really lovely. But but in London, that is normal to not be like that. It just everyone keeps themselves to themselves. But these,
Antisocial.
you know, Yeah, and then these ladies turned around. They were talking to me. They're like, "Oh, like what's his name or something?" And we started having a conversation, and they were saying that they were like, "Oh, get him the uh, what's it called? The mini. What's the thing called in Costa for the children?
I've
The
never
mini
gone to
the
Costa
mini
for
coffee
kids.
thing. Really?
No, I don't know. No, not
My sister
familiar.
takes her kids to Costa all the time, and they have the little mini one. It's called a, a, a baby chino. It's called a baby chino.
Ooh,
So they were
okay.
like, which I think it's just like a hot chocolate for kids, right? And so the older women were like, "Oh, get him a baby chino," and I was like, he's one, madam. I cannot get him a baby churro. And they were like, oh no, they love it. My nephew or my grandson loves it. He's a similar age. I was like, he's already had some sugar this morning. I was like, how could you give a hot chocolate to a 1-year-old? That's insanity. But anyway, the point is the reason I thought about the fact that the great icebreakers is because I think a child and seeing a child brings out the inner child in all of us. And the reason I say that is because I took him for a walk this week in the morning time. It's become a part of our routine that that we go for a nice walk. And he loves trucks. I think I told you before that he loves cars, and now it's like, but the big trucks like are just like amazing to him. And so when he's walking, and you can see all the cars going past and stuff. But then when a truck's going past, he stops and he
Hmm.
just stares at it. And so what I started doing is that when there was trucks, I was like, look, Zachary, there's a truck there. And what started happening is the truck drivers, these like butch, like stereotypical manly truck drivers, when they drive past, they'd see him looking, and they're like waving to him or like beeping their horn at him, like
Yeah,
rush hour traffic times in the morning, and you just see them like they're smiling, and it looks like it's made their day.
yeah,
And
definitely.
it just made me think like that's the type of person that I would imagine. You associate unfortunately truck drivers with like, I don't know, road rage or like just like manly men and like,
Okay.
do you know what I mean? And then
Yeah, I know what you
I've
mean.
probably
Yeah.
offended loads of people right now. But they was just like little balls of joy when they saw a kid. So
Yeah,
there's my
definitely.
story.
It's
Have you had
heart
experiences like
softening, I
that?
think. Generally, yeah. I think whenever you go out with your boy or your child, it's a heart softening, isn't it? I think it definitely sort of penetrates the deep tissue, the
Mm.
deep sort of shell that we put in front of us and stuff. I'm trying to think.
I guess because they're so
Even
innocent.
Yeah, but even without kids, even without your kids being with you, if you meet another parent, like in my old team, I would work obviously with different people every single day. But then as soon as I remember like meeting people for the first time, as soon as we established they've got kids, and it's like a topic of conversation. Like I remember I did a night shift once with some guy I'd never worked with before, and we literally spent half the night shift just talking about like potty training and nappies and all this other stuff. Like he was talking about his daughter and the troubles that he has trying to potty train her and stuff, and then I was obviously talking about Suleiman and some of the techniques and some of the challenges and walls we got into. So um, definitely there is this sort of element of bonding, I guess, or common ground with people that you either meet for the first time or even complete strangers, I suppose. Have you ever been to like a GP's practice and you just in waiting room and just
Yeah.
like other parents there, and sometimes it can be a bit awkward, but sometimes not, or like
And you also put
reacting
on
to
you put on the parent voice that knows that people are around, isn't it? You go from like in the house, you're like, Zachariah, don't do that, and in the GP, you're like, Zachariah, don't do
Zach-
that. It's like, why have I put on a more
Zachariah.
of a yeah? Zach, do you know
Zachariah,
what's
don't
really
do
funny?
that.
Bro, the funniest
Go
thing
on.
was when he was born, we went to his first doctor's appointment. The
Mm,
doctor looked at the sheet, and they come out and they say the name to call the person in. She looked
yeah,
at the sheet and she went, Zachariah, and
Zachariah.
I thought it's
Go for it.
spelled like phonetically how it sounds. It's like ZAK, Zach,
Yeah,
AR, Zaka, IYA. Surely that's not Zakaria. But I think because
Zachariah.
she knows that maybe like and he's asking phase and stuff, she's probably trying to respectfully pronounce it how it's like maybe like quote unquote meant
Yeah,
to be pronounced. Little does she know that
yeah.
it's just pronounced the same as I suppose she would have done it, Zachariah. Or Zach. So people often say Zachariah,
Zachariah. Do you
but
think people
Zachariah
are
is
going
like
to call him
IAH,
Zach?
isn't it?
It'll just be straight Zach, won't it? Sooner or later, it'll be Zach or
People will,
Zaki.
but we've done a good job at maintaining Zachariah for this first, 18 months or however long it's been now.
Hmm.
There was a period of time where people would call him Zach in the family, but we just
Nipped it in the
stuck.
bud.
We just like kept our feet firm on the ground with Zachariah, and then eventually everyone was calling him Zachariah. So, what about your kids? Have you had a Sully or Solo yet?
Well, I don't know if I started. It might have been me, but we just call him Susu. So just the
Yeah, that's a
SU
cute name though. Sometimes I
twice.
call Zachariah Zaku.
And then in Ilyas, because Suleiman pronounces it as Idias, he can't say L. He'll say it with a D for some reason. He'll say Idias. I just end up calling him Idias all the
Idias.
time.
Because you
But
grew up thinking his name is Idias.
yeah, Idias. There you go. So these names kind of you could come up with them naturally, or it kind of just sticks, doesn't it? But you'll see what happens when they go to school, I guess, or playgroup or nursery or whatever. That's when it really sort of starts sticking properly.
We have a cousin who, when we were younger, like people, if they were calling us, like let's say for example, they're calling us from upstairs. If my mom or an auntie or my nan or someone, they'd say Oma, Oma. So by the way, in my family they call me Faisal, because you might have noticed if you've ever heard my brother say my name, and it's because in Urdu my name is Faisal, right? Like that's the way to pronounce it, and so
First,
like
okay.
the most easiest transition from Urdu to English would be like to say Faisal, but in more of a like English accent, which became Faisal. And I only recently, when I say recently, maybe like 6-7 years ago, like changed the way I would say my name to people. People would say, "What's your name?" I'd say, "Oh, Faisal." And then I started changing it to Faisal because when I would say that, people would be like, "Fasu, Fasu,"
Oh
I'm like,
no,
"No, and it just wasn't
He's
working." So I was like, "Do you know what? Let me say it how it's written, and also how in Arabic is Faisal, so it's kind of a bit
Faisal, yeah.
closer to the." So anyway, because people would say Omar Faisal, like come down, we'd always be together. My cousin started calling me
Mm,
Mafassal when I was younger, and
mm-hmm.
to this day, he calls me Mafassal. No, probably not to this day. I haven't. He's like a very distant cousin, so like I don't know if he
Yeah.
still calls me I don't know, but yeah, Mafassal was my name.
How did you come up with the name of Zakaria? What was the process there?
The process was this. It would be so I had some requirements for names. My requirements were basically that it was Islam, like strongly
Muslim, yeah.
Islamic,
Yeah.
yeah, and had a good meaning.
Hmm.
And so after that, it was a case of us saying names that we both liked
Hmm.
until until there was one that both of us liked. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
yeah, of
I like,
course.
for example, um, Ilyas. I also like Saleh and names like that. But my
Mm.
wife was not as fond of those names, and then she would like names that I wasn't as fond of. And then when we
Yeah,
hit a name that both of us liked, Zakaria, we just went, all right, fine. If we both like it, it fits all the
that's it.
criteria. Let's go for it. How about yourself?
With Suleiman, I think for some reason, me and my wife already kind of wanted to name our son Suleiman, so there wasn't much debate there. I think with Ilyas, it took a bit longer, but yeah, once it was pretty much the same process. Like I think we both went through
Ilyas is a
names that we
lovely
both
name.
like. Yeah, we both went through names that we both like. That's kind of it's hard, isn't it? Though sometimes because there's like this unwritten rule that if someone else has got their name, then you don't want to use it, kind of thing. It's a bit weird. I don't know why. I'm not too fussed, but
Yeah. I
I
don't know
get
why
that
that rule
sort of
exists
feeling.
either.
Yeah, it's just like I get it. Like if it's in the family, but even so, like who cares? Like take it or leave it, you know.
Yeah,
But it
I
is
know.
what
I'm
it is.
like that. Is like I would like. There's loads of names. Like I like the name Idris, but
Okay, that's nice.
Idris is a no go as well.
Really.
Because of the family. Yeah, bro. Do you know what? I think that this stream would look nicer if we just didn't have a split screen like bar in the middle. Look at that. It looks
Um,
much cleaner, right?
I'll be honest. On my side, that the whole split screen thing, everything that can be seen on YouTube for me isn't really showing up very well. That's why I thought it was lagging. But
Uh, I'm gonna keep it like
yes,
this.
that's fine. I mean, it's fine. I think.
No problem.
There we go.
Okay, let's.
Somebody wrote. Somebody said something. We should have a virtual audience or something so they can ask questions. Isn't that essentially what they're just doing now?
Yeah, this is a virtual audience, and you guys are more than welcome to ask questions. And
Yeah.
also, Faraz actually apologized to us. Faraz, you don't have to apologize. Oh, look at how Alama Barik, how beautiful that child is. If that's Faraz, a picture of yourself, then
Allahumma barik.
Yeah, I know about it, but you maybe need to update your picture. He says, "Sorry, bro, was
Oh,
eating, Chris.
ask your
Sorry, bro, was eating,
parents.
Chris. Maison scene is basically everything in the camera can see: lighting, props, people,
Must have been media
etc.
studies because
It's
we both
thing. Yeah,
must have
it
done
was.
media
Yeah,
studies, didn't we?
yeah, we
That's probably
did.
where I
It's the
picked it up
things
from.
that hold particular significance in the scene. Nice." And he said the maison scene. Lord. Okay, let's get into the topic of today's episode because it is we do Dad's doing a topic based now, don't we? So the
Oh
topic
yeah.
of today's episode is I have it written down somewhere. Let's have a look what I told it. Should you wait to have kids? So obviously,
Ooh.
there's the element or that we all know of, which is that ultimately it's Allah who decides. Everything is in the qadr of Allah, and
Yeah.
therefore we don't necessarily have a say in that. And
Yeah.
also, Allah blesses some people with children, and perhaps there's other types of rizq that they don't have, and he blesses
Mm.
other people with other types of rizq, and perhaps children is not one of them. So being aware of all of those things and understanding that there's an element of qadr, right? There is a big like general topic always that comes up in parenting and
Yeah.
in marriage and stuff like that, which is like, should you wait to either have kids or should you wait to try to have kids? So I'll pass that baton over to you, Shu,
Hmm.
to discuss with you, and then I think there's pros and cons, isn't there? So I guess we'll go over all of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good topic idea. Actually, it's not something I've ever thought about discussing. Don't think I've ever discussed it before on a public platform. Despite all the podcasts and stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting one because I don't know if men and women are different regarding this, but there's definitely a difference regarding sort of personalities and expectations of what marriage entails. Some people may like what you have to think of, I suppose, about the primary sort of reason that somebody would want to get married. Some people may want that sort of connection with somebody and obviously develop a relationship with somebody. Somebody might be very sort of focused on wanting to build a family, and kids is sort of like the primary sort of a drive for that. Um, I think, in short, and we can expand on it. I think you have to kind of establish what you want in a marriage, like what your primary sort of focus is in terms of wanting to get married, and then you need to, with your spouse, focus or discuss what kind of realistic life goals you want to achieve before you have kids, and not just before you have kids, but what life goals can you achieve better before you have kids, and what can you still do when you have kids. So, for example, let's say you want to travel a certain amount before you have kids. Well, how much of that travel can be done easily with or without kids? If you feel like you're going to struggle with a child, and doing all of that sort of stuff, or you can't afford it, or it's going to be a bit of a hassle, then maybe set aside certain goals and certain things that you want to do. If it's like a financial situation or whatever, you want your own place or etc., then you can sort of plan that way. But personally, like I mean, me and my wife didn't necessarily wait around too much, but
Yeah, I
at the
was gonna
same
ask.
time, yeah, like it
How
wasn't
many
very
years
long
into
at
marriage
all.
did you?
Wasn't even that, bro. There wasn't even that. Um, you know, probably less than that, that we
Okay.
found out she was pregnant. But um, at the same time, like that was my kind of idea of marriage. That's why I said that at the beginning. My idea of marriage was like, once I'm married, then it kind of just made logical sense to me that, okay, I need to have a child as soon as possible, because I had it in my head, based on like my relationship with my father and stuff, that I didn't want to be old or older, and my son being, the age gap between me and my children being quite far. I wanted to establish that quite quickly, and I just wanted a big family, akhi, and waiting around for me. I achieved the things I wanted to achieve, and I didn't have many other aspirations beyond the family. I don't have these sort of like, I want to travel the world. I want to see all of these things. I want to do all of these things. I want to live a particular type of lifestyle. Like for me, as soon as I got married, that was it. I wanted to just start family. Um, But like I said, that you're not always going to be, you're not always going to be eye to eye with your spouse, and maybe you need to respect what goals and sort of things that they want to do, and that's why you have to come to some sort of common ground, because it's easy when you're not married to think, I'm sure you can say the same, Akhi. It's easy when you're not married to think, oh, we'll have kids and before you have kids, like, oh, we'll have kids and we'll do this and we'll do that, and don't worry, and it's not going to hinder us and blah blah blah. But the reality is, I wouldn't say hinder you, but your life changes a lot. You have to adapt, you have to sacrifice, you have to put things aside, you have to become less, thoughtful about yourself and more thoughtful about what the kids want and what the kids need. And then you're also kind of tied down. The older they get, the more tied down you are to, like, school timetables, term time, the prices of things go up. If you want to travel, for example, then you're paying for not just 2 tickets, you're paying for 3 or 4 or whatever. Lots of things, Akhi. So you have to be prepared to just put yourself aside. And I think, this is Dad's Dunya, and I think maybe some dads aren't even ready for that themselves, and I don't think they know that they're ready for that or not. They live a life where they are the primary sort of focus in their life, Akhi, and you need to start thinking a bit less about yourself and be prepared to do so. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. So first of all, I'll put the question to the people on the stream. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I know there's a question there, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think it'd be worth me explaining my experience, because I'm quite surprised that our experience is different, and that's great for a discussion, because I thought that both of us would be like speaking with pretty much the same experience, and therefore, like, while we can have a great discussion and speak to the people in the audience, it will be limited. But it's not, because you guys, Allahumma barik, had Ilyas, I think it was.
Suleiman first, yeah.
Suleiman first, and then we had like a two-year gap, maybe a tiny bit more, but I think about 2 year, no, maybe even 3, let's say like 2.5, 3 year gap between marriage and a child. And obviously there was a miscarriage, obviously, that we discussed before, but even the miscarriage happened, and then, like, but it maybe like only 6 months, 7 months before we were expecting Zakaria. So it was still around the same time period, right? So we still waited like 2-3 years. And I personally am really grateful that we did, because we had some great memories, And you spoke about travel, and travel I think is the real big one. You hear a lot of people advise, like, younger people saying, if you get married, wait, like, I feel like I hear that around the 2 year mark quite often as like the average. I'll wait 2 years, travel, get to know each other. And even though that wasn't necessarily, it's not like we had like a written down plan, right? Like, but at the same time, that's how it turned out. And I am grateful that we had those 2 years to go through, like, the things in marriage that you go through, that, like, if you're first time married, then you go through a lot in marriage that you've never been through in life, and it's interesting, and you're living with somebody for the first time, and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot you have to go through in that first year, where you're trying to understand how to live with another person, but also understand how to live with that person, and they're trying to understand how to live with you. And then there's the traveling aspect, like you said, like traveling with a child, as in, like, even if you leave the child with someone at home, back in your country, you're still traveling with a child is not the same. So we did that. So I've traveled with Zachariah staying here, right? So, like, we still traveled alone as a couple after we had Zachariah, and we traveled alone many times as a couple before we had Zachariah, and it's a massive difference. And the difference, did you guys ever travel together before you had Suleiman?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, great. So the difference for us really was that even though we traveled alone together, we would miss Zachariah so much that our hearts would be back in London, and you can't fully enjoy yourself. Whereas when Zachariah didn't, for example, exist, we had no knowledge that he was going to exist. You can't miss something that doesn't exist, right? And so, like, we would be able to enjoy those holidays 100%, and I think that's important as well. So I'm not saying that I'm pro waiting, but that was our experience, and I'm grateful for it. With that being said, I think that the cons of of waiting are that you don't know, like we said, what's decreed. Like there's couples who may try for 10, 15 years, and that's when
Mm.
they have a child, right? Like after 10, 15 years. And so it's not a case of like, okay, now it's been 2 years, let's try, and then all of a sudden you have a kid, right? Like it could take 2 years from then. And then you'll think, oh,
Of
why
course.
didn't we try on day one? Like, why don't we
Yeah.
always want, like, aim to have children? Then we wouldn't know when they, like, whenever Allah
Yeah.
decrees it is when Allah decrees it, but let's not like try and put a stop to it ourselves. So, um, I guess
It's
ultimately,
interesting. I think.
I can only speak about my experience, and I'm grateful for it.
I think it necessitates growth, though. I think I feel like without kids, there is not much direction. There is.
I agree with
I
that.
think it's something that a man needs. A father needs. Because you're not. Your partner is an adult, a grown adult who is, despite the fact that you are there to provide and stuff, you are still very much, your wife, your spouse is very much an
Independent,
independent
yeah.
person, that can sort of, live without you essentially, and especially if they're, financially, working and whatever, and they can sort of, if they've got their own utilities and their own bills to pay, etc. You feel like maybe just an accessory sometimes. I don't know if you ever felt like that. I'm not saying I felt like that, but just conceptually thinking about it, you're not really there giving anything to anyone, like, like feeling like a father or husband or a man of the house sort of thing. But the moment you've got kids, it does develop
You've
this.
got a tribe all of a sudden,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So there's that, and that's the desire for anybody that's seeking to get married, with the right intention. Then asliyan, that is basically what's going to drive you. Um, in addition to that, Akhi, what the thought I had was like, I'm trying to think of the Prophet's name, subhanAllah. Am I going to remember his name?
Ibrahim
I've
alayhi
just
salam.
blank. La la la. No, it's the. I forgot his name. I can't believe I forgot his name because I was listening to his story the other day. It's the Prophet who had. He was tested by Allah multiple times to the point where his skin was like peeling off. Um,
Oh, had leprosy.
all his.
No,
Sorry.
that was a Sahabi who had leprosy.
No, yeah, it was, and all his children sort of were taken from him. Um, Oh, someone can say it in the comments, I'm sure. Essentially, though, this prophet suffered for many, many years until his wife, I believe, had to sell locks of her hair just to make ends meet. But he kept worshipping Allah, right? Until a day came when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered his dua, and he
Ayub,
rained,
says Rafiul
Ayub, that's it.
Muslim.
And he rained, I think it was like golden crickets or golden insects. Essentially, it was gold, at least, that was raining from the heavens, and he was gathering it and gathering it and gathering it, right? Uh, all these blessings that he was gathering, putting them in his, like, almost like his clothes. So, like making a pocket and just gathering as much as he can. And I believe his wife asked him, why are you rushing so much? Why are you rushing so much? Like, there's plenty. And I think his response, to paraphrase, was that this is the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, I should be taking as much of this blessing as I possibly can, right? And that's kind of the mindset. Like, children are a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And for you to, it's just a concept, it's just a thought process, right? For you to say, I'm not gonna have kids, I'm not gonna try and have kids for a certain amount of time, it's almost like it could be viewed as you saying, well, this is a potential blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm gonna put a time limit before I seek to obtain that blessing. It's a gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you and your spouse healthy, functioning bodies, etc., youth, etc. And it's one of those things that you want to take advantage of whilst you can.
Yeah, I do see what you mean
You get
because
that concept.
I understand what you mean.
Hmm.
I do understand what you mean.
I'm
But
not
I
saying
don't
it's
think
right
it's
or
that
wrong
simple.
answer.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
fine.
not
Yeah,
saying
I'm
it's
not
right or
saying that
wrong
you're
answer.
saying
It's
that,
just
but
a thought
I do,
process.
I do think that's I do think that things aren't as black and white as that. And on a
Mm.
general topic, like Ustad Muhammad Tim Humble, he released a series called The Muslim Family, and in
Yeah.
that he answers questions and he talks about contraception, right? And so like we won't go
Right,
into
right,
the
right.
details, the fiqh of contraception here because we're just not equipped to
No.
like have like a scholarly discussion. But he did mention in his series basically that there are reason there are like specified reasons why contraception is permissible, but like as a whole it's
Mm.
not like it's not something that you should use without a time limit. And I definitely would check his Tim Humble's series, like, you know, without so there's clarification there. But essentially, like, one of the points I remember from that question being answered was that he gave some reasons as to why, for example, you could use contraception, and then he said
Mm-hmm.
don't but he said don't use contraception without like a almost like say, okay, that's it now, like I
Yeah, yeah,
like, do you know what I mean? Like, we're putting us,
yeah.
and like, one of the examples he gave was like, if you feel like, for example, you have two children and you want to raise them properly, you want to give them their rights, and you want to raise them in their correct manner, and so you want to, like, for example, take a break and make sure you can raise them properly first.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Mm-hmm.
he gave examples like that. So, but so I know there's like a fiqhy part of this discussion, and I'm
Yeah,
trying like bounce around it by not going into the fiqhy part because it gets a bit complicated. But
yeah.
I do think that it's not as black and white as.
I, I also think that the actual, like, we're young, right, and we've only just had our children, really, but the
Mm,
blessing and we're not going to realize and truly appreciate having kids so young until we're much older. And that was what in all honesty, that was the primary thought process in my mind, because I was
yeah, I
so
won't say
influenced by that
so.
age gap. It's like, I know that bi'idhnillah, this is like a long-term investment, in the sense of I'm investing in a potential relationship with my children, right, or my potential children at the time. Um, so I didn't know, obviously, if we were going to have kids or not, but obviously we made an agreement that that's what we will try and do, and there will be no barriers there. So um, I think for me, it's like, subhanallah, when I am, how old is Suleiman now? He's 3 years old, right? So I was thinking, when I am 37, he'll be 13. And that's not too long. That's not too big of an age gap. And even if I'm staying engaged and stuff with him, um, then he's going to be a young adult, and I'll still be very much, bi'ibnillah, if I'm still around, very much, uh, close to him, in the sense that I understand what sort of challenges he may be facing. I'm not completely sort of void to, his interests and stuff like that, and then I can develop a sort of relationship where I can discuss things with him, and he can feel open to speak to me and stuff. And age isn't always a barrier to that. Just because there's a big age gap doesn't mean that that's automatically means it's going to be difficult. However, I want to be around, akhi, to see him grow, bi'idhnillah. I want to be around to guide him as long as I possibly can, and to assist him as long as I possibly can. And
Yeah, you want to be
you
the
know
cool young dad.
yeah, of course. And, we're not saying here, we're going to wait forever, for those that are going to wait. I'm sure, and I can appreciate some people want to wait a couple of years, and what's a couple of years in a grand scheme of things. But nothing is promised, Akhi. I think you kind of mentioned that
So
earlier. Nothing is promised. You wait 3 years, you find out, you can't have kids. Well, or you're struggling to have kids, or even so, akhi, you don't know what could happen, akhi. Allahu a'lam, and everything is, qadr Allah. But you could lose something, you could lose someone, you could lose, the ability to do something, you could lose all sorts, and that the opportunity, as it were, wasn't sort of taken. However, it's a delicate balance between what you plan and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans. You could plan to
yeah,
have kids straight away and not have them. You could plan not to have kids, and by accident, I say accident, that's not the best word, but you understand what I mean. You could plan not to have kids at the moment, but it happens anyway. So whatever was meant for you was going to happen, and whatever wasn't meant for you wasn't going to happen. And that's the sort of what we're taught, isn't it?
AK asks, do you not think it's important to develop a relationship with the person before having children, so you can learn and establish how you will raise your children together? I think that's an incredible point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that those discussions happen and should happen like early, as soon as
Mm-hmm.
possible. Those discussions about how uh, plan to be a parent, how your parenting techniques and stuff like that. But ultimately, you don't know until you're in parenthood. Like, one of you might say, "Oh, I think I'll be the nice parent and you'll be the strict one," and then like your parents, and naturally what comes out is that you're actually the strict one and the other
Oh
one is
yeah.
actually the nice one and stuff like that. Like I would
I
probably
mean,
think that maybe I'd be the nice one,
it depends what's
but I'm
going on, what
definitely
you
the
have to be
strict
nice
one.
about.
I'm definitely the strict one, like
Okay.
100%. I'm the strict one. I'm like,
Okay.
I have no emotional attachment to say no. Like, I remember
Yeah.
the other day, like Zachary was like screaming. I just looked at him and I thought, I can scream louder than you. Like, obviously I didn't, but it's like he was having a tantrum, and kids have tantrums, and whereas so I'm not gonna like give him a biscuit just to quiet him down all the time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. It's
So
difficult,
it
I
turns out
suppose,
I've become the
because
strict one.
to sort of respond to that question a bit, it's easy. Talk is kind of cheap in a sense. Like me and you could agree something now about some sort of plan that we've got, an event going up or whatever. I'm going to behave like this. You're going to behave like that. But then when you actually reach that event and reach that sort of time, it's only sort of personality that talks. Then it's only the your upbringing, your emotions, your personality, everything that's dormant is what gets acted out. So you can,
Mm.
and this is a thing, like even if you've just married someone and you're having marriage talks, and marriage talks are the worst for this, because you speak about the plans that you're going to have and the expectations of each other and stuff like that, right? But everything's 100% good and Gucci, isn't it? Because you're only going to say the best things, and you're only going to say the things that's expected to be said. And I think that's the wisdom behind families getting involved, because what you see is, you see the family and you judge the family, and by that you can then
Mm.
see what the expectations are. Because if you were raised in a particular way, then I'm sure you will have you won't have any objections to our child being raised in a similar fashion. Okay, like for example, I'll give an example of my wife. She has two and a half brothers. She's got a half brother as well, but the ones that she lived with were two brothers. She got her dad with her, and she's got quite a few uncles, right? And so because of that, there were a lot of men in her life that were quite protective over her. So there were certain sort of I don't know what you want to call it, rules, or sort of expectations that, if you're going to go to a particular place, then someone has to go with you, or you're not allowed out past Maghrib or something like that, just for our own safety and whatever, right? But that was something that she kind of grew up as normal. Okay, so with that in mind, if I was to have a daughter and there was those kind of sort of rules put in place for her protection and for her safeguarding, then it's not something that's going to be a huge objection or something completely foreign, right? It's an expectation that she's no doubt used to, and that if I admire that because I've seen it in her family, then I can then employ that with my daughter being in there if I was to have one. So a lot of it is kind of like, you kind of need to agree or understand this prior to the whole marriage process. You kind of need to, this is
Yeah.
why you need to think of marriage not in the terms of,
It's
just,
important to talk about your intentions with children
of
and
course.
stuff before you get married as well, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You need to, this is why, like, as much as like, it's very easy to say, uh, you know, Dean over Dunya, or like not just Dean over Dunya, but like disregard culture. Like culture doesn't matter. I'll marry anyone from any culture, or I'll marry anyone from any sort. It doesn't matter as long as they're Muslim, right? That's all well and good as long as you can see the practical benefits of coming from the same neck of the woods, not just from physical countries or cultures, but also from the same expectations and understandings of what is normal, within your sort of family and upbringing and stuff. Because when it comes to kids, akhi, like, you're just going to default to what you know, but they're going to do the same thing, and then if you're both defaulting to separate no's and separate norms, then there's going to be a clash at some point. So you need to kind of, it's hard because there's no way, akhi, that you can have a conversation with your spouse um, about every single thing that may come up, and small things actually that can come up between parenting can turn into big things if there's a massive disagreement. These are there can be small sparks that light a bigger fire. But alhamdulillah, I haven't had any of those issues myself, but I can no doubt see that there's things that we've both naturally agreed on because we've come from the same sort of background or same sort of understanding. And if we didn't agree on them, there would have been big clashes, and they're not always something that's rooted black and white in the deen. It's a lot of it is stuff that expectations that you kind of bring with you from your family and from your culture and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, isn't there? I've noticed that as well, that may not be wrong, but just the way you've been raised is very
Mm,
different, and is obviously going to be different to the way somebody
mm,
else has been raised. And
mm,
you could have the same culture, you could be being raised next door to each other all your lives. Everything could have almost been exactly the same in terms of
mm,
your nurture uh, and your nature, other than what goes on in those four walls, how you're raised by your parents, how you're
mm,
parented,
mm,
and that makes such a big impact. I spoke about this before on a podcast that, like, in our upbringing, it's like the worst thing you could do is roll your eyes, right? Like, let's say, for
really?
example, my
Okay.
mom's talking. It's like, if my mom talks to me and I'm like, or even if she asks me to do something, like, can you wash the
Yeah.
dishes? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's it, bro. You can't roll your eyes at your mum.
Yeah.
You can't roll your eyes at anyone. And there was another one that I mentioned on another episode, which was the episode with Raheem Jung, which was that the word "shut up." Like, you can't tell your siblings to shut up. It's
Really.
just rude. And so growing up, "shut up" was like a swear word in our house.
Hmm.
And so to this day, 27 years old, I can't tell Omar to shut up. I'd say anything but not shut up. Like,
Yeah.
this is it's no go. Well, I can't roll my eyes. And so because of that, I wouldn't put up with Zachariah rolling his eyes at me because I see it as a sign of disrespect.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, and we haven't had this discussion, so I'm not saying my wife would be fine with it, but whereas perhaps she wouldn't see it as big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's just being a moody teenager. Whereas for
Yeah.
me, if he rolled his eyes at me, it would be like the biggest sin you could commit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and none of those are actually wrong. Like, it's great to be understanding. It's a moody teenager. Let me put a blind eye to it, and it's also great to discipline respect from an early age.
Mm,
Both done without excessiveness are great parenting techniques. Um, but if you guys clash on those, the inconsistency, I can imagine, of parenting will be a real struggle. So I think I had a chat with my missus once, and I said some things that, like, I wouldn't stand for in my children,
mm,
and rolling the
mm,
eyes was one of them. And the reason I told her was not so that she, um, it wasn't. I don't, the reason I told her was because if that happens, I would want her to know that it's a big deal to me and that she
mm.
needs to be on my side with that.
Yeah.
Even though it might not be a big deal to her. Like, for her, it might be like, oh, he just rolled his eyes at you, like, deep down. But on the surface of it, so that he doesn't get inconsistent parenting, it's like, don't roll your eyes at someone
Yeah.
older than you. And then maybe privately we can talk, like, okay, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Of course. Of
I feel
course.
like consistency in parenting is so important
Yeah.
to an extent.
It's
Obviously, someone has to be the good one, someone has to be the bad one sometimes,
yeah.
which is understandable. But
It's
to an extent,
it is difficult. It's a difficult sort of, I do fall back on this sort of natural inclination thing. You have to be sure that what's natural is what is the thing that you're pleased with the most, not these sort of artificial agreements because they are easily broken. You know, with the example you've just given, your wife may or may not, she may agree with you that it's disrespectful. She may not, and she may try her best, to if she feels like it's not a big of a deal, she'll try her best to obviously to comply with that and to not allow that to happen. However, there may be
mm,
times where it slips, right? And that slip can be actually
yeah,
quite because it only takes one slip for your son to see that slip and realize, oh, actually, it might be okay if I do it around mummy.
yeah,
You understand what I mean? And that's it. And then it becomes like a secret sort of thing that you do, right?
that's a good
Um,
point. Yeah,
and this is why, like, I go back to there's little things like that, and I'm guilty of it myself. Like, I remember, now that you mentioned that example, there's like a word in the Tunisian dialect which is like you say it to kids, right? It's a cheeky little word that you say to kids. It's never been deemed as bad in at least my neck of the woods. And I remember when it wasn't
what's the word?
until it's like it's a word for bottom, but it's a very very like child baby way of saying it, right? I'm not going to say it because
Say it, say it.
no, I'm not saying it because this is the whole point. This is the part of the story. But like when
Okay.
I said it to Suleiman, um, my wife was like, she's like gasped, like, how could you say that? And I was like, what's wrong with saying that? And in her dialect, in Algeria, it's like apparently really really rude, and you can't say it at all. And there was something else like a similar word in Morocco that I would say is in Morocco. All he says is like your mum. You say your mum, but it's like a joke, like a little thing that you say to kids all the time. But like same thing in Algeria, it's like complete and utter disrespect. And because of that, because I grew up saying the first word a lot, um, I said it once, and then she told me not to, and I was like, okay, well, fine, whatever. But then I like accidentally said it again, like at some other point, and then Suleiman kind of clocked like there was a clash there, like because she's clearly telling me off, but I'm clearly like
Mm.
laughing about it because I found it so funny that something that I grew up with being completely normal wasn't normal, like wasn't fine and wasn't okay. So this is what I mean. Like, yeah, it's not a big deal. At the end of the day, this whole thing isn't a big deal, but there can be things that spark off bigger problems, you know. And this is what I'm saying about the power of natural inclinations and the power of the norms and the things that we grow up with. Um, Obviously, nothing is that I've identified as a major deal breaker, but for some people, maybe theoretically, you can come across some sort of situation where it's a real deal breaker that you kind of keep falling into this thing that you naturally sort of go to, and they are just not happy with that at all, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think there's that topic of like inconsistency can work well in some occasions, and the occasion
Mm,
that it works well for us is with the grandparents. Like, so I wouldn't let Zachariah just like willy nilly eat biscuits all day long, right? Like
right.
adult biscuits, not like the biscuits I made for kids.
Yeah.
You're talking like a chocolate digestive, right?
Right.
I mean, he'd never eat a chocolate digestive in ours because I wouldn't give him a an adult biscuit. I can just
Right.
imagine how bad they are for adults, let alone children.
Right.
But but the inconsistency is that if he goes to his grandparents, bro, he can have what he likes. Like, they'll give him
Right.
everything and anything. Like, if they're having a biscuit with their tea and he comes up to their plate and gets biscuit, best know he's getting a biscuit, right?
Mm.
And at first I was like, no, no, like, don't give him that, don't give him this, don't give him that. And then I started being a bit more like I'll be like, I like they'll be like he'd like go get a biscuit from them, and I'm like, no. You know what I mean? Like I just be like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, it's fine. He's at his grandparents. Like, majority, 90% of the time he's with me. And if he feels like, oh yeah, secret between me and my grandparents, like I can get a biscuit when I go to the house, then let him, because I used to feel like that. Like, when I used to go to
Yeah.
my nan's house, I'd be like, oh, gas, like, because my nan has a sweet drawer and I can always have a sweets from there. And it's
Yeah.
nice. It's part of childhood. Like, I didn't grow up like uh worse for it. Like, I
Yeah.
have great memories of like, oh yeah, we get to go to Nan's house and have whatever we want, and it's fun. So I remembered that, and I was like, I pretend like I'm angry, but
Yeah.
and I don't know like at him, but like I know, and I'm fine with it. So I think there's times where that inconsistency can work to your advantage, or like just turning a blind eye and pretending you don't know is
Yeah.
helpful. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I suppose
kids think
it's
they're
it's
clever,
difficult.
don't they?
They do, bro. And I think, sometimes maybe we go to the other side, the other extreme, where we feel like we have to micromanage everything.
Yeah.
I think that can happen. Like you get into sort of helicopter parenting where you're sort of like, oh no, no, you can't have this, can't have that. And then you start telling your family like, oh, I remember like telling my sisters, oh wait, don't let him do that because we don't let him do that. Or don't, and I tell my mum, don't let him do that because certain things like that. And you know what?
Don't say
Sometimes you
bosh
can
him.
actually, yeah, yeah, don't say that word.
Yeah.
But like, you could rack your brain. Really, you could rack your brain trying to micromanage every single detail, and make sure that you've got this cookie cutter sort of child. And
Yeah.
and you know what? In all honesty, the biggest teacher is the example we set ourselves, isn't it? And I think that's this is the ultimate lesson I want to sort of get a home run on in this sort of episode, if you want to call it that, is that the thing about waiting to have kids or not should be centered around whether you're ready as a parent or not. Whether and that
How do you
extends
know
to
you're
marriage
ready?
itself. But this is it. Like it goes back to what I was saying, Akhi. Like, um, are you
I feel like
ready?
you get ready during it.
Yes, this is it. It's like
You
a
learn
chicken or
on the
the egg
job.
scenario. It's a chicken or the egg scenario. Are you ready before you have children, or is children the thing that make you ready? Like, are you, and I think the only bit of readiness I'd say is that you need to be prepared to put yourself aside, but you also need to strive yourself to a level of acceptability where you could see yourself as a parent, in the sense like you need to be present, you need to be there, and I'm not talking about work and stuff like that, but I'm talking about like where are you most of the time when
Mm.
you're not at work? Are you still doing the? Are you still planning to go out with your mates like every single day or every evening, or like you did beforehand? And I know that works both ways with both, the husband and wife, because the wife's going to have her friends and her social life and stuff like that, and it's going to be very normal to when you're both married and you haven't got any kids, to still keep that connection and still keep seeing those friends and still have those friends around and stuff like that. But with all due respect, and I know this is a reality, as soon as you have kids, especially for the mothers, that social circle has to pretty much change quite dramatically, and you'll see and notice that a lot of your friends become either very distant or they are replaced with those that have in common, like mothers. So your friends suddenly become other mothers, right? Because you can then plan accordingly, relate accordingly. Because you can go out with a bunch of single girls or girls without any kids, and you're focusing and thinking about your child, whether your child's with you or whether they're not. Do you understand what I mean? You're not naturally sort of enjoying that time. So I think, for women, I think it is going to be a very long and hard sort of thought process about having kids, because I think they're the ones that are impacted the most in terms of the sacrifices they have to make. And this is why, the Islam teaches us about the honoring of our mothers so much, is because they do sacrifice a lot more of their sort of freedoms, their liberties, their sort of choices that they can make, their independence, as soon as they have children, whether they like that or not,
Definitely.
whether they want to or
Definitely.
not. And I think maybe that's why, it may be that, maybe that's why I'm not too fussed, in the sense of, oh, did I have kids too young? Did I not? I didn't think about it too much because I still had it in my head that it wasn't going to limit me as much. But I think maybe for my wife, it was something that she probably had to think about more. And maybe now, she's not on the show right now, but if we were to ask her, I'm sure she would have a different sort of opinion and a different sort of mindset regarding the whole thing. I wouldn't say regret. I wouldn't say regret at all, because we don't regret Qadr Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'm saying just the thought process of what could have been possible or what may have been more practical, stuff like that,
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a huge sacrifice. 10x, man, like more than that.
Mm,
That your the woman makes, and it makes sense when you hear stuff like your mother, your mother, your mother, and then your father.
mm.
Um, yeah, it's always going to be something that you discuss together, and it has to be at the forefront of any mature conversation when you're looking to get married. Uh, that
Maybe
conversation of children and what you think.
maybe that's what we can advise then our brothers that are here, is that if you're not at that process yet, then maybe make it you are the emir of the house, but actually this is a decision that maybe needs to rest with your wife. She's the one that's going to carry that baby for the 9 months. She's the one that's going to have to give birth to that child, and she's the one that's predominantly going to raise it the most. And it may be that the advice we can give is that make sure that they're ready before you are, because
Yeah,
it's
I
easy
still
for
feel like
us.
it's a mutual. I still feel
It's a
like it's a
mutual
mutual decision
thing.
because
It's a mutual thing,
there's no doubt that there's no doubt that the woman makes more sacrifice, but it's
of
not to
course.
say that the man doesn't make any.
But imagine
So I
if you
think it's
wanted, imagine if you didn't want to wait and they did, and you kind of tried to convince them, right? And then they have the
yeah,
child,
you're right. You shouldn't be
and then
pushy. Yeah.
yeah. So it has to be a naturally
Agreed.
occurring agreement, as opposed to like I need to convince, I need to convince. Well,
Yeah.
Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Everyone's different, akhi.
You mentioned something before that was powerful. You said like as a man you feel like you have, I don't want to say purpose because our purpose comes from our deen, but as a
Hmm.
man you feel like perhaps you have more of like a tribe that you're responsible for once you have kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And it reminded me of what one teacher said to us. He said that a child is pious if the parents are pious, and
Mm,
so one of your roles and responsibilities is to be the best version of yourself. Because by being the
mm,
best version of yourself as a parent, you're giving your child the best chance of being a righteous and
mm,
good mannered child. It's like it
mm.
directly affects your child. It's not like I'm going to teach him how to be a good kid, but it doesn't matter what I do as long as I teach him the
Yeah,
correct things. It's I have
yeah,
to perfect myself to the best of my ability, and that's going to have a direct effect, um, spirituality wise, on the child as well. Like
yeah.
how the barakah works. And he was telling us a story about a famous scholar, like one of the pious predecessors, who became one of the giants, right? Like in
Mm.
Islam, and they said to him like they said something to him like, "What? How did you get to where you got to?" And he said, "It's because my father or my parents, who they were, kind of thing, right? It's like the
Mm.
righteousness of his parents led to his righteousness, just because they were righteous." So
Mm.
I think the responsibility of being a parent, and I suppose for our podcast, for this episode, for Dad's Dunya purposes, being a dad, um, the responsibilities go far beyond the physical that you do or the mental or what you teach, but it's actually like inwards. And what I
Mm.
love about Islam always is the formula.
Mm.
I love that the formula in Islam, in many way, in many things, is like different or opposite to the formula that our limited brains can think of. So, for an
Yeah.
example, the formula that our limited brains without Islam can think of when it comes to money is the more money I spend, the less money I have, or the
Mm.
more money I make, the more money I'll have, right? But where Islam's formula is different. Islam's formula is not based on how much you have or how much you make. It's based on the amount of barakah in it. How amazing is that? So actually, the formula to be rich financially, Islamically, is not make more money. It's give more money. The more
Mm.
the money you give as a sadaqah, the wealthier you will be. It's amazing how that formula is different to anything that we would, with our limited minds, know, or anything that is taught.
Yeah.
And so, when you know that, you feel like you know a secret, and you think, "Oh, let me." If I know that's the formula because it's a godly, like it's been told by a higher being, then
Yes.
if I know that's a formula, like it has to be true, and therefore let me just like go in on that formula. Or like you get offered a job, right? And one is like £100,000 salary, and the other one's a 30k salary. But the 100k salary is not halal, and the 30k is. Like it's like a secret, where like the formula in our limited mind is like the 100k is definitely the best way to
Yeah.
go. But the formula Islamically is the 30k because it's halal. And likewise with parenting, like in our heads, the formula is as long as I teach my child Quran and implement Quran in him every single day, he'll be a child of the Quran. Of course, that's the formula that only makes sense. It's scientific. It's like obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the formula Islamically goes deeper than that. The formula is if I make myself a person of the Quran, that's the best shot at my child
Yeah.
being a person of the Quran. That's why I just
Yeah.
love Islam. I feel like we've unlocked. Remember when like you were kids or in high school? Sorry, I'm going on this point, but I really
No, go on.
do love this concept. Remember when you were in high school and if you'd have a maths exam, you'd have to memorize formulas, and then what you'd
Yeah.
have to do is when the exam comes, the first thing I would do is in the beginning of my exam paper write all the formulas for the questions that will come later, so that at least I have
Yeah.
them all
Yeah.
written
Yeah.
down. And it's like we've been given that. How amazing! So everyone else doesn't know it, so they're trying to figure it out. How do I make more money? How do I
Yeah.
make more money? Trying to figure out. Oh, this. And we've got the cheat show, the code. The cheat code is give more. The cheat code is have barakah in all of your wealth. The cheat code is
Yeah.
pray istikhara. You know what I mean? And when you
Yeah.
have those formulas, or I think the plural of formulas is formulae or
Formulate.
formulae.
Yeah.
Form,
Formulate. I think
formulae
formulate
sounds
because
better. I it's the formula, bro.
it's the formula. Akhi. It's interesting because it's what your child observes, isn't it? As well, it's not just like the Quran example. Like you could pay God knows how much to send your child to Quran school, but him just observing you reading Quran all the time develops this nostalgic love for it to a certain extent and links it to his love for you, um, and then within turn the love for the Quran. So it's like monkey see, monkey do kind of thing, and we talk about that a lot.
Mm.
But even so, you know, there are a lot of parents, and I've seen them. Of course, we've come into contact with loads of parents through our life that just they think that nurturing the child is just spending on them, right? It's just buying them whatever they want. They might not be there, they might not be present, but buying them this or teaching or sending them to this school or taking them to this after school club or this lesson or whatever it is, that's the solution, right? But it's actually the most valuable thing, like you've sort of noted, is them being present and them being a better version of themselves. Like I'm sure, I don't know about you, but I learned more from my dad by just observing him interacting with other people than I did from my dad actually telling me anything. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
my
Likewise.
my dad would take me with him, like especially in Tunisia, whenever he'd go out, I'd be with him, and I would just you just observe how he would act with other people. And you know what? I was thinking about this today when I took my son to the supermarket. Um, I was thinking, you know what? Nothing I can do right now to my son will ever really teach him anything because he hasn't got concepts down. You know, you can't. I can't sit with him and have a proper discussion about how to behave because he won't he's just not going to understand what I'm trying to say to him, right? But what he will understand is just natural interaction, right? So if I go out and if he's out with me and he sees me, okay, bump into a friend of mine, you know, salam alaikum, salam alaikum. Oh, okay, that's what you do, salam alaikum, right? That's just sort of in there, right? Me smiling at a friend of mine, or me being polite, or me saying please and thank you, and this sort of stuff. And I realized like my son's lacking social skills, not because he hasn't been out for lockdown, it's because he hasn't observed us interacting with anyone else other than him. Right, that was my sort of concern today. I was thinking like lockdown. No wonder, like because he went to nursery again recently, and you know, there's a few things of social things that he can't really pick up on. Like he's a bit too clingy. He hugs people all the time, stuff like that. Like he doesn't really know what's 100% acceptable and what isn't. Right, that's fine. That will happen. That will, you know, he'll learn that with time. But I realized, like I said, it's not because I haven't taught him or I haven't. It's because he hasn't been able to observe us outside of our little family. He hasn't been able to observe me in the masjid speaking to
I feel sad
a
about
few
that as
brothers
well.
or the sheikh. Do you understand what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
that's where the knowledge and the ilm is learned, really, the manners and stuff. Like, you're not going to have manners with your son. You're going to speak to your son like he's a child. But what he's going to see is you, the man that he looks up to the most, suddenly, you know, lowering their head a bit and being respectful to someone else and being, you know, having manners with someone else and saying thank you to somebody else and doing a favor for somebody else. And these are the things they're going to pick up on. But you're never going to be able to exercise those things with your son because you are above your son in the hierarchy. So how is your son going to know, you know, how is your son going to know how to act in front of anyone else if he's never seen it before, you know? So it's that kind of thing. I think
It's true.
the trick is to sort of have them with you at all times. But then I want to make more effort. That's something I'm definitely not doing as much of that I should. Is just, but I think he's at the age now. Like today, kind of solidified it for me because I'd taken him out previously to certain like supermarkets and stuff, and it was a bit. He was quite manic and quite running around. It was hard to keep hold of him and stuff. But today was the first day where I
Give
felt
him a
like, you
little
know what?
snack.
Yeah, well, we could distract him with that. But today was the first day where I even gave him a bit of responsibility, actually, which I'd never done before. Where I got to the checkout and he wanted a magazine, right? But the magazines are like all the way on the other side of the supermarket, like past the checkout thing. So theoretically, he'd have to go past the checkout, grab one, and then come back and pay for it. And I thought, do you know what? And it was a bit of a thought, but I was like, let me give him some responsibility and let's see what he does with it, right? Because I know a few months ago, if I told him to do this, he would just run off. That was the sort of kid he was. But I said to him, okay, go and get a magazine. So go and pick one and come back here, you know, and we'll pay for it here. So in my head, I was like, okay, the old Suleiman would have just picked loads of stuff at once. Anything he saw would have taken, like brought it because he wouldn't really understand the concept of just one and will come back and pay for it. The other thing is like, he would just see something else and run off somewhere else. Or like, do you understand? It was this sort of thing. Like I was like, okay, I need to learn to let go a little bit. And it was kind of like what we said last episode about giving
That's
him
amazing.
the responsibility, you know. And there's a second story too that actually that you've reminded me of. But yeah, he went there, he started looking, and he was looking, and I was conscious like he's a bit far away. People are going to think he's on his own, and he looks very young, you know. But I kept observing, looking. I called his name just to remind him I'm still waiting, kind of thing. And then he was like, okay, picked one, came all the way back, and he was just super excited. And I was like, do you know what, that was good. He learned something there. He learned to do something on his own. I
That's
wasn't
amazing.
there holding his hand and stuff. Brought it back, and boom. And that reminds me, earlier I was washing the dishes, and it reminded me of what we said last episode about hindering, right? My wife had gone out with our youngest to get him go to the doctor's. He had a doctor appointment. And it was just me and my son. And my wife, quite right, it was like, oh, while I'm gone, can you just help clean the house up, do some dishes, whatever. So I started doing the dishes, and he ran into the kitchen with me, and he was like, Daddy, can I have a go? Daddy, I want to help you. And my gut instinct was like, no, kind of thing. That was my gut reaction. Like, no, go and play with your toys or whatever. But I honestly remembered what we said about
This is
last episode.
serious manly washing up that's being done
Bro,
here.
this is Dad's
Go
Dunya
play
in
with your
action,
toys.
actually.
Yeah, go play with
Dad's
your
Dunya in
toys.
action.
Dad's
So
washing dishes.
I picked him up and sat him next, the counter. And, of course, it's going to slow me down a little bit. But actually, the lesson that we learned was that he can also do stuff as well. So, I'm doing some of the dishes. I give him a spoon. I'm like, all right, scrub it with this. He starts scrubbing it and he's, rinsing it and stuff. We're teaching it. And he's just getting really excited about washing dishes, subhanAllah. But that could have easily been completely dismissed by me saying, no, go and play with your toys. This isn't for you, kind of thing. But anyway, that was just Dad's Dunya in action.
Bro, you know what? Zachariah did something. We'll end it on this. But you saying that that's something new that your son did reminded me of something that happened today. This very day, moments before we went live on Dad's Dunya, Zachariah did something brand new for the first time.
Go for it.
So every night, I to put him to sleep, I prepare his milk and then I kind of show it to him. Right, milk in our language is called dud. So like for a baby, you'd say like dudu. So I'm like, Zachariah, dudu. And as soon as I say dudu and I like show him the bottle, he's running to his bed. He just can't wait to get in bed, right? And he always does that. So like, along my bed, he's good at sleeping. And so I'm like, dudu. And he runs to his bed. And then he's like waiting for me to pick him up and put him in the bed and stuff. And that's what he's been doing for months. Yeah. Dudu, run to the bed, knock out. But today, I went, Zachariah, Dudu. He ran to the bed, the bedroom. Then he turned around and he went back into the living room. I was thinking, he's never done that. Like, he's so desperate for that milk that, like, he's like, like the way, like crying at me to pick him up sooner. Yeah. But he ran to the bedroom because I had the milk. Then he turned around for a second. Bro, you don't know how cute this is. He went into the living room and he waved bye-bye to his mum.
Oh.
Like to say, I'm going to sleep now, I'm going now. And then he came back for the milk and he went to sleep.
Allah,
that's so cute.
That's beautiful.
She was shocked. She's like, what? You came back to say bye to me? Because normally he doesn't even know that. He's like, oh, so, but he's like, today he clocked like, all right, now I'm going for the next 12 hours. I'm out.
Yeah.
Let me just go say goodbye, bro.
Allah,
so cute.
Allah,
and his desire is that milk. So he thought his desire.
Yeah.
Because his desire is that milk. And with the kids, you can see when they desire something for, like, he's like moving his feet up and down. He's like, wants the milk, right? Like, and he fought that desire so that he could go and say bye. Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's moments like that make it all worth it, isn't it? Because I know we started this topic off with waiting and should we wait and should we delay and all of that. But then at the end of it, قدر الله ما شاء فعل. You could have you could realize you're pregnant 6 months into your marriage or whatever, and then these are the moments that you're blessed with as a result of that. And so you've got to remember that there are people without these blessings and the people that will never have these blessings, and this is honestly the greatest blessing after the deen. This is one of the greatest blessings that you can have in this dunya, all right? And 100%. You just have to cherish it. Alhamdulillah.
I've got a little bit of, put my knee up and you can see a bit of dirt. Cool. It's been over an hour. That's quick. Guys, thank you so much for watching Dad's Dunya. Please do remember that Freshly Grounded is a very non-advert heavy channel, and we would love to keep it that way and provide the best content and keep it as clean as possible in terms of like not shoving adverts down your guys' throats and so on and so forth. And so things like the super chat feature that we have turned on, or the signing up to Patreon, make a massive difference in supporting Freshly Grounded, in the upkeep. We've just recently brought on a new editor, which means that we can like churn out content even faster for you guys, and so on and so forth. And so supporting us via, for example, the super chat on these live streams makes a huge difference in supporting Freshly Grounded, but also in helping to keep us as ad free as we can possibly do so, and so does stuff like supporting us by purchasing the game. By the way, anybody who is interested in getting the game, I think there's literally like a couple copies left in this batch, and then we're sold out until the next batch comes. So if you did think about wanting to grab the game, there's only a couple left. So yeah, please do support via super chat, Patreon, purchasing the products, or simply just sharing this out, or subscribing to Freshly Grounded's YouTube channel would be huge, because we had set this goal to get 100,000 subscribers by Ramadan, which is 39 days away, and we have a competition going where you could win a pair of Apple AirPod Pros 2 with Freshly Grounded branding on it, with custom engraving on it, and sadly we're failing, Quite frankly, we got 39 days left. If we get out of the 50,000 we needed, we like gained 4,000. Alhamdulillah, we are very proud and happy with all of those. But if you do like our content, please do hit subscribe, so we can spread this as far and wide as possible. With that being said, Muhammad, Jazakallah khair for your time today. And I asked the brothers and sisters in the comment section to make dua for Muhammad's father, who is ill. And keep him in your du'as. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu fikum.
That monologue should have happened at the beginning, because now there's no time. So, oh guys,
It's
like
okay.
make sure you support with super chat, and it's like bye.
It's okay.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate the time. Inshallah, we'll catch you.
Anytime, bro.
We'll catch up in the next episode. I was thinking, I had an idea for next episode, Daz Dunya, but I'll chat to you about it off air, inshallah.
Offline.
Actually, I don't think we're gonna go for that, because I think I might save that idea for my personal channel.
Oh, I see how it is. All right,
Really, yeah.
selfish.
It might
No
not work.
sharing.
It might not even work on a podcast thing anyway. So why not use it?
Look,
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
be the judge of that. Okay, I'll be the judge.
Yeah, I'll chat to you about it now, and then you let me know. But I might still selfishly use it.
No worries.
All right, bro. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Welcome, salam.